Hello everybody, welcome back to 4th Age Guys. Today we are taking a look at the battle prospects for the City-kingdom of Tharbad. And I thought we would start with the battle and then take a look back at the aftermath and at the other options. Because what we have here is kind of like the home team for Tharbad. These are the units that you can train in your homelands with a couple of exceptions. The two units that you will not see here are the Tharbad Militia, which is your Tier 1 Spear Militia troops. And I also did not elect to bring the Ballistas. Both of those units have their place. The Tier 1 Militia types are, of course, good for garrisons. They're relatively weak, though, and you probably won't want to lean on them too much in the field, although they do have a large unit size and they are fairly cheap. The Ballistas I tend not to find super useful in field battles. They are very handy when you are attacking a settlement, so you might want to have some around to send to your siege armies when that occurs, because of course you can besiege a settlement and then immediately assault. What we do have, though, are a couple of these pike units. This is a Tier 3 unit for you, and so they have been placed on the flanks here on either end. A little bit further in, we have the Axemen of Tharbad. This is a Tier 2 unit, very solid, axe and shield, and they don't have any special abilities or traits. They're not armor piercing, they're not super fast, but they're very solid. So as a Tier 2, they're quite good. In the center here, we also brought a couple units of Mariner Swordsmen. These, as you can tell, have javelins in addition to swords, making them a pretty versatile unit. You can find these at Tier 3 in your homelands at your military development. And then we have some Spears of the Bridge. These look a lot like the militia of the Reunited Kingdom and Adunabar, the Kingdom Militia, and they're very similar, but of course these are a Tier 2 unit, so Tharbad is in some ways a step behind the Reunited Kingdom. I did bring some of my cav. These are the Merchant Scouts. Taking a closer look here, you can see that they have no shield. They are relatively fragile in terms of their defense, but they do have that two-handed spear that does allow them to do a lot of damage against cavalry especially. So what you can do is send them around the flanks to snipe the enemy general, especially if that's a cavalry general. What the AI is doing, as you can see, I'm fighting against Dunland here. They're doing quite a good job, although I probably would have done this on the other flank to get some height advantage. But they're sending these Dunlandish horsemen around to my flank, and so I had to send these guys over to meet them. When I started this battle, I thought, well, okay, let's give Dunland a bunch of guys, and then I will pretty much set up a line. And there was a hill, and I thought, well, this is going to be too easy. You will see that this is not my best work, and there's a few reasons for that. One of them is that Dunland has a lot of missiles, so they're throwing spears with their cavalry, and I waited way too long to try to chase them off. But they had a lot of cav. They out-caved me. And they've got all of their infantry practically has throwing spears as well, so they've quickly beaten my left. They're holding in the center, although I will start to beat them there. And they've even routed my other pikemen on my right. So they've done a really good job already, the AI has, at overwhelming my defenses. And that's the thing about Dunland, especially when you're playing a unit like Tharbad, which does have a lot of advantages. On paper, your units are better, but the smaller unit sizes means you have to work a lot harder and use combined arms certainly better than I've done here. Now, part of the reason I thought this would be easy is that I do have a fair amount of archers. I've got 4 units of the Mariner Bowmen, which are your Tier 2 archers, and I did bring a unit of your Tier 4 archers, the City Longbowmen. And these guys are rock-solid troops. Right now we're targeting the enemy general of Dunland. And these guys are going to be, in some ways, my saving grace. After all of my other infantry have basically fled the field or I've managed to rally them back, these archers are going to hold the line. And as you can see, they're doing that now. They're holding out, actually, against the Chieftain's Guardsman after cutting him down with their arrow fire. And they're actually going to be the ones to take him out here. Well, my actual general is over here fighting against Dunland's pikes. You can see him here, the Merchant Guard. I'm really relying on my archers now because my line is basically gone. So this is not going well. The cavalry here, I think we're going to see me form up and attempt to do a charge. There goes the enemy general. At some point, maybe not. Maybe I'm just reforming somewhere. Oh, that's right. So I've got these tribal spearmen, and they're a very tricky unit because they're throwing spears at me, but they're also, of course, a spear unit, so my cav is not going to want to engage them. What I'm doing instead is I'm sending in my city longbowmen to tie them up with that sort of infantry troop. It's going to do a lot better, and then I can send my cavalry down in to charge, hopefully. Over in the center here, again, it's down to the archers who are fighting off these tribal spearmen of Dunland, but they've got a lot of troops left. And then my longbowmen did not hold long enough, but let's see if we manage to rout them with this cav charge. Evenly matched, wavering. There we go, just barely, and it required my axemen of Tharbad to come over as well. In the center, we're holding still. I think we're doing okay. We've managed to drive off the right, and now it's going to be a matter of bringing the fight back to the archers, because Dunland also has a couple unit of archers that they've kept just hidden downhill in the trees. It was not easy for me to see them, and anyway, I was busy dealing with the core of their army. So I've had troops routing, I've had them coming back. We've got axemen here going against my archers, and this is not going to go very well for me. So for quite a while, it looks as though, honestly, I was going to just lose this fight. Let's speed this up a bit. But I'm bringing my right over. That consists of the few pikemen I have left and my merchant guard, my bodyguard unit. My longbowmen have rallied, and so now they're going to rout this left fragment of Dunland's forces, Axes of the Wolf. So this is a higher tier unit. You can see this is a two-handed axe unit, which makes them very deadly. But we will rout them. We're going to have to get the archers and my general and what few other infantry units I have left. That'll see them off, and then we're going to claim our slim victory. And this is, slim is extremely generous. We only have 351 survivors out of over 1,000. And we did manage to defeat the enemy, but that was a close run thing. So what I'd like to do here is take a look at the composition. So let's go to the custom battle screen here and see what we actually had to work with. So I purposely elected to have my forces outnumbered. When you're playing as Tharbad, you're going to find that happens a lot. It's not necessarily that you're going to have 18 as opposed to 20 units in an army. You're still going to want a 20 stack, but very often you're going to be fighting against factions that have more than one stack, or they've got unit sizes that dwarf your own. So these 100-man tribal spearmen, these 80-man tribal pikes, these 80-man axes, even the horsemen are going. Well, actually, the horsemen don't outnumber us, but a lot of these units have javelins, and some of them cause fear. So there's a lot to deal with, and I want it to be a little outnumbered because that's kind of how you're going to feel when you're playing a campaign as Tharbad. So I went with a general, a family member bodyguard. Again, these merchant guard are not incredibly decisive. They're strong. They are able to hold their ground quite well, but they're vulnerable to cav charges. They're somewhat vulnerable to ranged as well, and they're really there to hold the line rather than to strike a swift blow like you would normally do with spear-armed cavalry, for example. Or even Dunland's general is effective against armor because he's got a large-ish axe. So your merchant guard, you really have to sort of embed them with the rest of your infantry and use them as kind of a bulwark for the rest of your troops. I went with a couple units of the Spears of the Bridge. As I said, these are the equivalent of a Tier 1 militia unit for the Reunited Kingdom, but for you, they're Tier 2, so enjoy them. Again, this is as opposed to your Tier 1 militia, which I elected not to bring. But these guys, again, are great for garrison, and at need, you would have a few to bolster your numbers. These axemen, again, are quite good, but they're vulnerable to ranged troops, and so that was what we suffered a lot of in the fight you just saw. Against Dunland, a lot of those troops had throwing spears, so our front line was getting obliterated and then charged by a lot of units which had a war cry, and some of them had a fear effect and so on. Against other factions like Adunabar or the Reunited Kingdom, for example, these guys are going to be a lot stronger. They're going to hold longer because there's simply more of them in the unit, and they're not going to be getting shot down quite as much. The Reunited Kingdom and Adunabar tend to field more melee-oriented troops rather than missile-oriented. They will bring their archers, but they're not going to have all the rows upon rows of javelins that Dunland will. We do have our own javelins. We've got these. I brought a couple units of Mariner Swordsmen, and we do have our archers as well. Mariner Swordsmen are a tier 3 unit for you, and they're good. They're expensive, I guess, like everything. So you may have to watch out with how many of these you actually bring. And notice the unit size, 61 versus 80 for the Axemen. So it's a question of quality versus quantity, and in some ways. Having a little bit of quality units and more quantity units, it can be better, but not always. So you may want to experiment with it a little bit. With your bowmen, I had 2 varieties here. I had 4 units of Mariner bowmen. These are your tier 2 archers, and they're absolutely essential. Without them, you're just going to be at the mercy of Dunland's archers and all the other archers in the game. And so you're going to need them to thin out the ranks of those factions that field a lot more troops than you can. So I could have gone heavier here, and that probably would have been good. If I had used, let's say, another unit of city longbowmen and maybe even a 3rd unit of city longbowmen, that may have helped me a lot in that last battle. The city longbowmen are tier 4, very strong, and as you saw, they're quite good in a melee role when supported, but they did pretty okay soloing the enemy general there. Of course, you're going to want to use them to shoot enemy troops, and had I been a bit more proactive in that battle that we saw, I could have tried getting them around the flank potentially and shooting into the back of some of those enemy soldiers that were fighting my infantry and then charging them into flank or so on. Another option is I could have brought more cav. 2 units of these cavalry versus 4 of the Dunlandish horsemen is not that great. These have 40 in a unit, and these guys have actually more, 53, but they're more vulnerable. They don't have javelins. They don't have shields even, so they're going to take a lot of losses and potentially rout. They're a tier 3 unit, but they're going to potentially rout, so you just have to be aware of that. It's kind of hard for you to access that cav. And then finally I brought a couple of pikes, which were kind of surprising that they routed, but the thing is they were both at the extreme ends of my line, as you saw there, and so they were just susceptible to all of that punishment. The javelins from the horsemen that had outflanked them, and the infantrymen who were coming up the hill at them, and so they held for a while, but couldn't hold out for long. Again, a couple more units of these guys might have helped, but if I had to do this over again, honestly, I'd bring more archers. Maybe change this composition a little bit, because maybe I would bring a couple fewer of the axemen or spearmen instead of these spears of the bridge. Yeah, probably 2 of the Tharbad pikemen and a few more archers, and that might have been better. But there are some units here that you can see that we did not bring to the fight that are not on your homeland's list for training. So let's talk about those. First up, probably the closest unit to you in terms of outside of your homelands is Vassal Warhounds. So this is something that you can train in Dunland eventually. And obviously you're going to want to start conquering Dunland. You have to. It's, parts of that territory are on your victory conditions. And Vassal Warhounds are a fear unit. That's primarily what they're for. And that's nice because you don't really have any other options for causing fear and attacking the enemy morale. These guys actually can. Your city longbowmen do have the option to use flaming missiles, which does affect morale. But I prefer usually not to use them in that role, just because it seems like they're more effective at killing things when they're not using fiery arrows. But these Vassal Warhounds, if you bring a unit, that might help to scare off the enemy, especially if you're facing a faction, like Dunland, which tends to have lower morale. In terms of cav, you actually do get a few options once you get further afield. Once you go north from your starting position into Ariador, you will be able to eventually train Eriador riders. These are a higher tier cavalry unit. They may only be available in settlements with the horse resource. So that would include, let me think, possibly Fornost, definitely Tardal, which is north east of your starting position. These are very similar to the mercenary Eriador riders that you can find all over the place in your homelands and to the north. And so it's nice to be able to train them yourself. Notice the difference in defense here, from 18 down to just 10 for your native cavalry. These guys have a bit worse of a charge, but they've got a shield and they're much sturdier. Far sturdier still are the retainer riders that you can train in Rohan. So these are very similar to the riders of the Mark. They've got a spear and a shield and mail and a helmet, and it's good stuff. 25 defense, again, as opposed to 10 defense of your merchant scouts. So absolutely grab these guys. In a campaign video, I showed you that I had a campaign in progress where I went north first from my starting position and was getting up to Bree and Fornost and places like that. I wonder sometimes if it would have been better for me to concentrate on the south first, right? After you take 3 ways, then turn south, start fighting Dunland, and then get into a good position to conquer into Rohan, or wait for them to attack you inevitably and take the fight there, because you're going to get a lot of rich territory, and then this is just a solid cav unit to have. If you feel like a long trip, the Harondor Outriders are waiting for you in Harondor. So this would be southeast of Gondor. Right, so if you go to Ithilien and you head down across the Poros River, you'll be able to find these guys. So they're interesting because they are a javelin and sword cavalry unit. They're not as light as most cavalry skirmishers are. They've got decent armor, very good defense of 23, but they've got the missile attack with a javelin, and they can fight with sword and shield. So I would use these to attack the enemy's back line of archers that they might leave unprotected. Make 2 or 3 units of these in an army, and pair them with your other cavalry, and then send them around the flanks to sort of do some damage. But that would make an interesting campaign. I've never actually trained these guys because I've never conquered all the way down to Harondor as Tharbad, but it might be fun to think of yourself as a successor kingdom to the reunited kingdom, perhaps, and take over Gondor for yourself, and then move down into Harondor. Now, if you do take over Gondor, you will find retainer swordsmen, which is very nice. These are very similar to your bodyguard, the merchant guard unit that is accompanying all of your family members. But it's good. They've got a slightly larger unit size than what you might normally see. They've got the shield wall capability and reasonable morale, which is very good for this mod. Reasonable morale just sounds so-so, but it's actually quite decent. Not a lot of units have this. So that is, I think, all of the units that you can train as Tharbad. Again, that fight, I hope, illustrates not my tactical skill certainly, but the dangers that you have when playing as this faction, especially against kind of an apparent underdog like Dunland. So what you have to do as Tharbad, because you don't have any single knockout blow troops, is you have to use them all together. In some ways, Tharbad is very similar to Rune, in that there's not like a single unit that you're going to be leaning on for most of the campaign. You're going to have good infantry to hold the line. You're going to have some cavalry to do some flanking and rear charges. You're going to, if anything, the stars are going to be these archers, especially the city longbowmen. And with that, you can expect to hold out and conquer from your starting position. So at any rate, I hope this has been helpful and you've learned a bit about the City-kingdom of Tharbad and what they can expect to do on the battlefield and what they can expect to suffer, unfortunately, if you are not paying too much attention. So let me know how that battle went in the comments if you feel like it, and let me know what other factions you'd like to see for guides. I do hope to do them all at some time, but I haven't fixed the order yet for any of them, so I will take any suggestions into consideration. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I'll check you out in the next one. Bye-bye.